Amara thought marrying Tay would be the happiest moment of her life. In Kasimba City, she had imagined laughter-filled dinners, warm smiles, and a family that would embrace her as one of their own. She had pictured Mama Nurai, Tay's mother, patting her hand and calling her daughter. But reality was far from that dream. From the very first day, Mama Nurai's cold eyes and sharp words made Amara feel like an outsider. Every compliment she offered seemed to carry a hidden sting. Every smile felt forced. Worse, Mama Nurai loved to talk about Zinal, her wealthy friend's daughter, as if she were the perfect woman Tay deserved. Zinal would never make this mistake, she would say, her voice dripping with judgment, while Amara's heart ached in silence. Amara tried to smile, to ignore the whispers and the comparisons, but inside, every word cut deeper than the last. She had married for love, believing love would protect her, but Mama Nurai seemed determined to remind her she didn't belong. And yet, even as her spirit trembled, Amara held on to one quiet hope, that she would one day show her true worth, no matter how cruelly it was dismissed. That evening Amara returned home from work, her heart tired but still holding on to a little hope that maybe, just maybe, Mama Nurai would treat her like family. But the moment she opened the door to her room, her world shattered. Her clothes were gone, neatly folded and placed in a suitcase, her personal belongings packed as if she were leaving forever. Her small sanctuary, the place where she had dreamed of building a life with Tay, was empty and cold. Confused and trembling, she ran into the living room, only to find Zinal there, smiling as if she belonged. Mama Nurai stood behind her, a triumphant look on her face. "Amara," she said, her voice calm but cutting, "you have never been the wife Tay deserves. From today, Zinal is the true wife." Amara felt like the air had been stolen from her lungs. Her heart pounded and tears stung her eyes, but she refused to scream. She could only whisper, "Why?" But there was no answer, only the cruel satisfaction on Mama Nurai's face. Every word, every glance screamed that she was unwanted, replaceable, invisible. Zinal, the golden-haired daughter of wealth and privilege, was now welcomed in the home that Amara had hoped to share. And just like that, all the plans she had made, the dreams of laughter-filled mornings, the quiet nights with Tay, felt like they had been erased in an instant. Amara's hands shook as she picked up her small bag, her mind spinning with hurt and disbelief. She realized then that love alone could not protect her from the bitterness of rejection. But beneath the shock, a quiet ember of strength began to glow. She may have been cast aside, but Amara silently promised herself she would rise again. And when she did, no one would ever question her worth. The day of the family gathering, Amara tried to put on a brave face, hoping that maybe she could just smile and pretend everything was normal. But as soon as she arrived at the grand hall, she realized that hope had been foolish. Mama Nurai stood at the front, dressed in her finest traditional attire, and with a bright false smile, she introduced Zinal to everyone. "Everyone, meet the woman my son will marry," she announced, her voice ringing through the hall. Amara's heart sank so hard she felt it might stop. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in, and all eyes turned toward her. Not with sympathy, but with curiosity and judgment. Whispers began to ripple across the crowd. Some were shocked, some amused, but all carried the unspoken message. "You are no longer wanted." Zinal laughed lightly, charming everyone with her polished words and perfect posture, while Amara stood frozen, a quiet ghost in her own life. She felt the weight of every stare, every murmur pressing down on her like stones. Mama Nurai's eyes caught hers across the room, a cruel, satisfied sparkle in them as if to say, "See? You never belonged here." Amara wanted to shout, to defend herself, to tell them they had it all wrong. But the words stuck in her throat. She felt small, humiliated, like a shadow of the woman she used to be. Tears pricked her eyes, but she held them back, unwilling to give Mama Nurai the satisfaction of seeing her broken. Instead, she breathed slowly, pretending to admire the decorations, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. Inside, her heart ached with the bitter taste of betrayal. Every smile she forced was a mask, hiding the storm of hurt and rage that threatened to explode. But deep down, beneath the humiliation, a quiet voice whispered, "This is not the end." One day, they would see her worth, and it would be far beyond what any of them could ever imagine. That thought, fragile as it was, kept her. Amara couldn't take it anymore. Every laugh, every whisper, every cold glance from Mama Nurai had built up like heavy stones on her chest, and now they crushed her completely. That night, she quietly slipped into her room, trying not to wake anyone, and stared at the little things she had gathered over the years. Her clothes, her favorite books, the small photos of her and Tay. They all felt meaningless now, reminders of a life that wasn't hers anymore. Her hands shook as she packed the few belongings she could carry in her small bag, each item feeling heavier than the last, as if weighted with memories and shattered dreams. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of the wooden floors beneath her careful steps. She paused at the doorway for a moment, taking one last look at the place she had hoped would be her home. Mama Nurai's face flashed in her mind, the cruel words, the comparisons to Zinal, the cold laughter that had echoed through the halls. Amara's chest ached, and tears rolled silently down her cheeks. She didn't scream, she didn't cry out loud. She simply let the sorrow wash over her. Then with a deep, steadying breath, she whispered to herself, "They may reject me, but they will not destroy me." Stepping out into the cool night, she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing on her. The streets of Kasimba City were dark and quiet, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. But as she walked, each step became a little lighter. With every tear that fell, she felt a spark of something new, strength, determination, a quiet fire that refused to be extinguished. She didn't know where she was going, and she didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. She would not let their cruelty define her. Tonight she left as someone broken, yes, but also as someone who had begun to understand her own power. And deep in her heart, she promised herself that one day, she would rise far higher than they could ever imagine. The streets of Naburi buzzed with life the day of the cultural exhibition. Bright colors, music, and laughter filled the air as people displayed their crafts, foods, and traditions. Amara sat quietly at her small stand, her table covered with the handmade beaded necklaces, bracelets, and earrings she had spent long nights creating. Each piece told a story of patience, of resilience, of beauty born out of pain. She didn't have a big sign or loud voice to draw people in, but those who stopped at her table felt something different. Her work carried a soul. As she carefully arranged the beads on a velvet cloth, a tall man dressed in simple but elegant traditional wear stopped by. Amara didn't recognize him at first. To her, he was just another curious visitor. But his eyes lingered on her work longer than anyone else's. He picked up a necklace, the coral beads shining under the afternoon sun, and smiled. "This isn't just jewelry," he said softly, almost to himself. "This is art." Amara's cheeks warmed, unsure of how to respond. She looked up, and only then did she realize who stood before her. Prince Kelechi, heir to the Arumba kingdom. Her heart raced, but his presence wasn't intimidating. Instead, there was kindness in his eyes, a gentleness that immediately put her at ease. "Did you make all of these?" he asked. Amara nodded shyly, her voice barely above a whisper as she explained how she found healing in her craft. The prince listened intently, not interrupting, not dismissing her words the way others had. For the first time in a long while, someone saw not just her pain but also her strength. Before he left, he looked at her directly, his expression sincere. "The world needs women like you, women who turn brokenness into beauty." Those words sank deep into Amara's heart. She didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter would change everything. In that crowded exhibition, where others only saw beads and thread, Prince Kelechi saw her grace, her dignity, and the high.
After that first meeting at the exhibition, Amara couldn't stop thinking about Prince Kelechi. There was something different about him, something rare. Unlike her in-laws, he didn't judge her past, her struggles, or the pain that clung to her like a shadow. Every conversation they shared was filled with genuine interest and respect. He asked about her designs, about her life, about her dreams, and he actually listened. For the first time in a long while, Amara felt seen, not for her mistakes, not for what others thought she lacked, but for who she truly was. They met often after that, at charity events, cultural festivals, and sometimes in quiet gardens where the air was scented with jasmine. Each meeting deepened their connection. Kelechi was patient and kind, never rushing her or making her feel uncomfortable. He admired her strength, the quiet resilience that had carried her through humiliation and heartbreak. But more than that, he saw the elegance in the way she carried herself, even when life had tried to knock her down. Amara, in turn, found herself drawn to his warmth, his humility, and the way he spoke about his people with care and responsibility. Their friendship blossomed naturally, like flowers opening to the sun. They laughed together, shared stories of their childhoods, and confided in each other in ways they hadn't with anyone else. Kelechi never treated her like a damsel in need of rescue. He treated her as an equal, a partner, someone whose ideas and spirit mattered. With every passing day, the bond between them grew stronger, unspoken but undeniable. One afternoon, as they walked through the palace gardens, Kelechi paused and looked at her with a seriousness that made Amara's heart skip. "You have a strength that this kingdom needs," he said softly, "and a heart that inspires everyone around you." In that moment, Amara realized that their connection was more than friendship. He saw her not just as a talented artist or a kind soul, but as someone see.
The afternoon sun bathed the palace gardens in a warm, golden glow as Amara walked along the cobblestone path, her fingers lightly brushing the petals of blooming flowers. She had come to enjoy the quiet, to forget, if only for a moment, the pain of her past. But she had no idea that this afternoon would change her life forever. Kelechi appeared from behind a row of tall jasmine bushes, his eyes shining brighter than the sun itself. He held a small velvet box in his hand, and his gaze was fixed entirely on her. "Amara," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "From the moment I met you, I have seen something in you that the world has yet to recognize. Your strength, your grace, your kindness, they are rare gifts. I have watched you rise above pain and humiliation, and I cannot imagine my life without you." Amara felt her chest tighten, a mixture of disbelief, awe and hope swirling inside her. He knelt on one knee, opening the velvet box to reveal a ring that glittered like 1,000 stars. "Be my queen," he whispered, his voice soft but firm. "Be the woman who stands beside me, not just in title but in purpose. Let the world see your true worth. Let them know the power of a heart that refuses to be broken." Tears welled up in Amara's eyes, blurring the magnificent garden around her. She could barely speak, but her smile said everything. Her heart, which had been guarded for so long, overflowed with joy. She nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, I will." Kelechi rose and gently slipped the ring onto her finger. He pulled her into a hug, and in that embrace all her fears, all the rejection, all the years of pain seemed to dissolve into the sunlight around them. In that golden moment, Amara felt a new chapter of her life begin. Not one of sorrow or humiliation, but of love, respect, and a destiny she had never imagined. She realized that sometimes the world's cruelest blows can lead you straight to the life you were truly meant to live. And for the first time, the news traveled faster than Amara could have imagined. Word spread through Kasimba City and beyond. The woman who had been mocked, humiliated, and cast aside was now marrying a prince. Whispers of disbelief and awe filled the streets. People stopped in the markets, in cafes, even on the dusty roads, repeating the story as if it were a fairy tale come to life. Mama Nurai's face was the first to flash in Amara's mind, and she couldn't help but smile at the thought of the shock that awaited her former tormentor. On the day of the wedding, the palace of Arumba was alive with color and music. The air was filled with the scent of fresh flowers and the soft rhythm of drums echoing through the grand hall. Amara stepped out in a breathtaking traditional gown, embroidered with gold threads and coral beads that glimmered in the sunlight. Each bead seemed to tell a story of her journey, of pain, of endurance, and now of triumph. Her veil shimmered like morning mist, and the crown placed lightly atop her head symbolized not just royalty, but the strength and dignity she had carried all along. As cameras flashed and reporters captured every moment, Amara walked down the aisle with steady grace. Every step felt like a victory, every glance from the crowd a silent acknowledgement of her worth. Guests gasped and whispered, some in admiration, some in disbelief, as the woman they had once dismissed now radiated power and beauty. Kelechi awaited her at the end of the aisle, his smile warm and reassuring, his hands ready to hold hers as they stepped into a new life together. The ceremony was both traditional and personal, blending Arumba's royal customs with the intimate touches that reflected Amara's heart and story. Laughter, tears, and applause filled the grand hall, but through it all, Amara remained calm, serene, and radiant. For her, this was more than a wedding. It was proof that resilience, patience, and dignity could transform even the deepest pain into triumph. On that day, back in Kasimba, Mama Nurai sat stiffly in her lavish living room, her hands gripping the arms of her chair as anger and disbelief burned inside her. Word had reached her faster than she could have imagined. The girl she had scorned, the one she had called unworthy and pushed out of her son's life, was now a queen. Neighbors whispered as they passed by, some with awe, some with barely hidden laughter. The girl she replaced is now a queen, they murmured, and Mama Nurai's pride twisted into something sharp and painful. She replayed every cruel word she had spoken, every judgmental glance, every time she had compared Amara to Zinal. The confidence she had worn like armor now felt fragile and empty. Zinal, who had once been the center of her schemes, seemed smaller somehow. Her charm diminished in the shadow of Amara's triumph. Mama Nurai felt a hollow ache where her pride used to live, replaced by the slow, heavy weight of regret. Her servants moved quietly around her, sensing the storm behind her eyes, but no one dared speak. Mama Nurai had always commanded respect, but now that respect felt meaningless. Every picture of Amara in her royal attire, every headline celebrating her rise, seemed to mock her silently. She had spent so long trying to control her son's life, to shape it according to her desires, and yet life had spun a story she could not control. As she sat in silence, the voices of the neighbors echoed in her mind, mixing with her own thoughts. Pride, she realized bitterly, had blinded her. She had rejected someone who deserved love, grace, and respect, and in doing so she had allowed herself to be left behind. Alone with her thoughts, Mama Nurai finally understood the truth. She had lost more than she could have imagined. Amara, the woman she once dismissed, had risen higher than anyone in Kasimba could have predicted. And in that quiet, painful realization, Mama Nurai's anger softened into shame, a silent acknowledgement that her cruelty had Months passed, and Amara's life had transformed completely. She had gone from the girl cast aside and humiliated to the queen of Arumba, a woman respected, admired, and loved. When she decided to return to Kasimba, it was not out of revenge but to show the world, and perhaps Mama Nurai, that she had risen above cruelty with grace. As her royal carriage rolled into the streets of Kasimba, a wave of awe and excitement swept through the city. Crowds lined the roads, their eyes wide, voices raised in song and praise. Street vendors paused, children ran alongside the carriage, and even elders, who had once whispered doubts and judgments, stood to watch the spectacle. Banners fluttered in the wind, and the streets seemed to shimmer under the golden afternoon sun, as if the city itself celebrated her return. People who had once mocked her now bowed deeply, whispering words of respect and admiration. The same neighbors who had scoffed at her humble beginnings, who had laughed when Mama Nurai spoke of Zinal as the better wife, now stared in quiet wonder at the woman who had walked out of their lives and returned as royalty. Amara smiled gently at them, her heart steady, her posture regal but kind. She had not come to shame anyone. Her power lay in her dignity, in the calm confidence that radiated from her every step. Mama Nurai watched from a distance, her chest tight, unable to meet Amara's eyes. The woman she had tried to erase was now a living symbol of strength and resilience, a queen who carried herself with a quiet majesty that no amount of gossip or cruelty could diminish. As the carriage reached the heart of the city, Amara stepped down, her gown sparkling with gold and coral beads, her crown gleaming in the sunlight. She raised her hand in a gentle wave, and the crowd erupted in cheers. In that moment, every whisper of doubt, every look of scorn, every moment of rejection from her past became a stepping stone to her triumph. Queen Amara had returned, not Brock. The day of the family gathering, Amara arrived with a quiet confidence that filled the room before she even stepped inside. Royal guards flanked her, their polished uniforms glinting, and attendants moved gracefully around her, carrying gifts and ceremonial items. The moment she entered, conversations stopped, laughter froze, and all eyes turned toward her. The girl who had once been dismissed and humiliated now walked with the poise and presence of a queen. Every step she took was measured, deliberate, radiating strength and dignity. Mama Nurai, who had once controlled the room with her sharp tongue and cold glances, froze in place. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She barely dared to raise her eyes to meet Amara's, and when she did, they flitted away like timid birds. For the first time, she felt small and powerless in the presence of someone she had tried to belittle. The air between them was thick with unspoken history, pain, betrayal, and now undeniable triumph. Zinal, who had once gleamed with ambition and charm, sat quietly in the corner, her bright confidence extinguished. The carefully planned smiles and rehearsed words of flattery had no place here. She looked at Amara with a mixture of awe and defeat, realizing that the plans she had hoped to ride to power were now shattered. Amara's calm composure and subtle authority filled the room in a way that left no room for envy or resentment, only acknowledgement. Amara didn't raise her voice, didn't gloat, didn't make any dramatic display. She simply moved through the gathering with grace, shaking hands, offering polite smiles, and speaking with warmth to those who greeted her. Every gesture, every glance carried a quiet message. She had risen, she had endured, and she had done so with dignity. The room, once a place of her humiliation, now recognized her presence with respect and reverence. In that icy, tense silence, Amara's victory was complete, not through revenge but through the undeniable. Amara stood in the center of the room, the soft glow of the chandeliers reflecting off her golden and coral gown. The air was thick with tension. Mama Nurai's lips pressed into a thin line, Zinal's eyes lowered in quiet shame, but Amara's face was calm, serene, and impossibly strong. She could have shouted, she could have scolded, she could have let every hurtful word from the past pour out, but she chose something far greater: grace. "I hold no grudge," she said softly, her voice steady and clear, carrying across the silent room. Every ear turned toward her, every eye fixed on the woman who had once been humiliated, pushed aside, and belittled. The words weren't just polite, they were powerful. They told everyone present that Amara's strength did not come from anger or revenge, but from dignity, self-respect, and an unwavering belief in her own worth. She paused, letting the silence sink in, giving the room time to feel the weight of what she had endured. Then, with a gentle but firm tone, she continued, "Let this be a lesson. No one can erase what destiny has written. You may try to control the lives of others, to decide who is worthy and who is not, but life has its own way of showing the truth. What is meant for you will never be taken, and what is not will always find its place." Mama Nurai's pride crumbled a little more with each word. Zinal's plans, her carefully polished ambition, lay in pieces at her feet. But Amara did not gloat. She did not point fingers or laugh at their pain. She turned to the gathered family and guests, offering a soft smile, warm and inviting, as if to say that life could be hard, cruel even, but rising above bitterness made a person truly powerful. In that moment, Amara became more than a queen of Arumba. She became a queen of hearts, a living testament that true victory comes not from hurting others, but from honoring oneself. She had reclaimed her story, her dignity, and her destiny, and she did so with a grace that left the room. Becoming queen had changed Amara's life, but she refused to let it change who she was at heart. She could have used her title for luxury, for lavish parties, or to display her wealth and power, but that was never her way. From the moment she wore the crown, she thought of her people first, of those whose voices were quieted, whose dreams were small, and whose hopes often went unnoticed. She wanted to use her position to lift others, just as life had given her a chance to rise. She started by opening schools for girls across Arumba, believing that education was the key to freedom, opportunity, and self-respect. Each school was bright, welcoming, and filled with teachers who cared not only about lessons but about nurturing the confidence and creativity of every girl who walked through the doors. Amara often visited, speaking to the students, listening to their dreams, and encouraging them to aim higher than anyone ever told them they could. She wanted them to know that no rejection, no humiliation, and no obstacle could stop them from becoming their best selves. Beyond education, Amara funded small businesses for women in villages and towns, offering them the tools, guidance, and support to provide for their families and create a sense of independence they had never imagined. Markets grew busier, homes became more secure, and women walked taller, their heads high with pride and determination. Her presence became a beacon of hope across Arumba. People spoke of the queen who had been rejected and humiliated, but had not let bitterness rule her. She inspired others with her courage, her humility, and her dedication to service. Stories of her kindness and vision spread quickly, and soon, her name became synonymous with strength, compassion, and justice. Amara understood something crucial. A crown was not just a symbol of power, it was a responsibility, and she carried it not for herself, but for everyone who needed someone to believe in them. Through her actions, alone in her room, Mama Nurai sat on the edge of her bed, the weight of silence pressing down on her like a heavy cloak. The house that once felt like a place of control and pride now seemed empty and cold. Her hands shook as she covered her face, and tears slipped silently down her cheeks. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her mistakes. The years she had spent criticizing, comparing, and pushing Amara away, believing she could decide who was worthy of love and respect. She thought of Amara, the woman she had dismissed so easily, the daughter-in-law she had tried to erase from her son's life. And now, that same woman was more than she could have ever imagined. She had become a queen, a leader, a symbol of strength and grace. Everywhere Mama Nurai looked, in the papers, on the news, even in the whispers of the town, Amara's image shone. Confident, radiant, and kind. Every school Amara opened, every business she supported, every act of service reminded Mama Nurai of what she had failed to see. A remarkable woman who deserved every bit of love, honor, and success. The pride that had once filled Mama Nurai's chest had dissolved into something else, quiet regret, heavy and inescapable. She realized painfully that no apology could undo the past, no words could reclaim what she had lost. She had wanted to control destiny, to shape lives to her liking, but life had written its own story, and she had been left behind. As she lowered her gaze, Mama Nurai understood a truth she could not escape. The crown that now rested on Amara's head was more than a symbol of royalty. It was proof of strength, dignity, and resilience. It was a crown Mama Nurai had denied her once, but life had given it anyway. And in that quiet, tearful moment, she knew that the daughter she had rejected had become the daughter every mother wished for. Compassionate, courageous, and unstoppable. The regret was deep, the loss permanent, and the lesson unforgettable. Amara's story traveled far beyond the borders of Arumba, reaching towns and cities she had never visited. People shared it in whispers and shouts, in articles on social media, and around dinner tables. They spoke of the girl who had been humiliated, rejected, and pushed aside, only to rise higher than anyone could imagine. Her life became proof that pain, when met with courage and dignity, can transform into strength. She inspired women and men alike, showing that rejection is not the end, but often the beginning of something greater. Mothers told their daughters about her, encouraging them to hold on to hope when the world seemed cruel. Young people, struggling with their own challenges, found in her example the courage to keep moving forward, to keep believing in themselves even when doors closed in their faces. Amara herself never sought fame or recognition. She simply lived her life with grace, using her position as queen to serve her people, uplift the weak, and create opportunities for those who had been overlooked. And that, more than anything, became her legacy. The proof that being replaced, being rejected, or being underestimated is not a curse but sometimes a doorway to something far greater. In every village, every city, every heart that heard her story, Amara became a symbol, a living testimony that destiny has its own plan, that true strength is born from adversity, and that those who are patient, brave, and kind will always rise. Her journey from pain to power reminded the world that sometimes, the very hands that push you away are the ones that guide you toward your true destiny.